I've always thought of babysitting as one of those harmless little jobs, easy money for easy work. You keep a kid alive for a few hours, make sure they don't burn the house down, and go home with some cash in your pocket. But that was before the Hartley family, before the rules, before I realized that not every house in Minnesota is meant to be lived in. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon. The air was heavy with the damp chill that clings to early November. I'd just finished my shift at the local coffee shop when Mrs. Hanley, my boss, mentioned her friend needed a babysitter for the weekend. I was about to say no. Finals were coming up, and I'd been planning to study. But when she told me the pay, I couldn't resist. $200 a night. Cash. They live just outside town, she said. Real nice family. The house might seem old-fashioned, but don't let that bother you. They're particular about things, that's all. Particular how? I asked, but she just smiled in that way people do when they don't want to explain something. The drive to the Hartley's house took me nearly 40 minutes. The roads wound deeper into the woods, the air growing colder with every mile. When I finally saw the mailbox, its paint peeling, the name Hartley carved in crooked letters, I almost missed the narrow gravel drive. It twisted through a thick patch of trees before opening up to a clearing where the house sat like a frozen relic from another century. It was big, too big for a small family. A pale blue farmhouse with gabled windows, tall enough to look down on the world below. Every curtain was drawn tight. The porch creaked under my boots as I climbed the steps. Before I could knock, the door opened. Ah, you must be Lydia. The man who greeted me looked like he'd stepped straight out of an old photograph. His smile was polite, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm Mr. Hartley. Come in. The air inside smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The furniture was antique. Dark oak, hand-carved, the kind that looked too valuable to actually sit on. A tall grandfather clock ticked softly in the hallway, its pendulum swinging like a heartbeat. Mrs. Hartley appeared next, a thin woman with pale skin and perfectly brushed blonde hair. Her dress looked outdated, the kind of thing you might wear to a church picnic in the 1950s. She smiled at me the same way her husband did. Kindly, but distant. You're right on time, dear. That's good. We appreciate punctuality, she said. Our son Samuel is already upstairs. He's a quiet boy, but once you get to know him, he'll open up. I nodded, clutching my backpack strap a little tighter. Sure, no problem. Before I could ask anything, she handed me a folded piece of paper. These are the house rules. Please follow them exactly as written. We don't tolerate improvisation. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. Still, I forced a smile. Got it. They said their goodbyes quickly after that. I watched through the front window as their black sedan rolled down the gravel road until it disappeared into the trees. The moment they were gone, the house felt heavier, quieter. Even the ticking of the clock seemed louder. I unfolded the paper. Rules for the house. 1. Samuel must be in bed by 8:30 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. 2. Do not let him open the second floor window. It must remain locked at all times. 3. If you hear scratching from inside the walls, ignore it. 4. Do not go into the basement. 5. If the phone rings after midnight, do not answer it. 6. Should you hear footsteps upstairs after 10 p.m., check Samuel's room immediately. If he's in bed, do not leave your room until morning. 7. Keep all mirrors covered after 11 p.m. I stared at the paper for a long time, trying to decide if this was some kind of joke, but the neat looping handwriting didn't look playful. It looked serious, almost ceremonial. I sighed, folded the paper, and shoved it into my back pocket. Easy money, I told myself. Weird family, but fine. I'd seen stranger. The first few hours passed quietly enough. Samuel was a small, pale kid with brown hair that fell into his eyes. He didn't talk much, mostly sat at the kitchen table drawing with stubby crayons. When I asked what he was working on, he showed me a picture of a big house under a dark sky. The house looked a lot like this one. There were figures in the windows, small, black shapes. Who are they? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at me with that distant, almost solemn expression kids get when they're about to say something they know will scare you. They live here, he said softly, but they don't come out until it's dark. I laughed awkwardly, even though his tone sent a chill up my spine. You mean like ghosts? He shook his head and went back to coloring. They don't like that word. By 8 o'clock, I was ready to get him to bed. I checked the clock. 8:20. He brushed his teeth, climbed into bed, and pulled the blanket up to his chin. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the soft glow of the nightlight. "Good night, Samuel," I whispered. "Good night," he murmured back. Then, after a pause, "You locked the window, right?" I blinked, remembering rule number 2. "Yeah, it's locked." "Good," he said, "because last time she tried to come in." "Who?" He didn't answer. I checked the latch anyway. It was shut tight. The trees outside swayed in the wind, branches scraping against the glass like fingernails. I closed the curtain and stepped out, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping through me. Downstairs, I made myself some coffee and curled up on the couch. The TV barely worked, just a handful of static-filled channels, so I scrolled through my phone instead. The clock ticked on. 9:30. 10. I was starting to relax when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratching. It came from the wall behind me. At first, I thought it might be a mouse, but the sound was too deliberate, too slow. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Pause. It moved from one side of the room to the other, like something was dragging its nails along the inside of the wall. I swallowed hard and remembered the rule. If you hear scratching from inside the walls, ignore it. So I did, or tried to. I turned up the volume on the TV, but the noise didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, and then as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I exhaled shakily. Probably just pipes, or the wind. Old houses do weird things at night. At 10:17, I went upstairs to check on Samuel, just to be sure. The hallway felt longer than before, the shadows stretching against the walls like they were breathing. The house groaned with the shifting of wood. When I reached his door, I listened. Silence. I cracked it open. He was asleep, curled up tight under his blanket. The window was still locked. Everything seemed fine. I turned to go but froze when I heard a thump from the attic above. I looked up. Another thump, heavier this time. Then a slow dragging sound, like someone crawling across the floorboards overhead. I remembered the rules again. Footsteps upstairs after 10 meant I should check Samuel's room. He was here, safe. So I stepped back, closed his door, and went to my room. I didn't even turn on the light. I just locked the door, pulled the blanket up, and tried to ignore the sounds. At some point, I must have dozed off. But I woke again to the sound of something faint, something that didn't belong. A voice, soft, whispering, right outside my door. "Lydia." It was a woman's voice, slow and drawn out, like she was testing the word. I held my breath. My heart hammered in my chest. "Lydia, open the door." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't answer. Don't move." Maybe it was a dream. Then the doorknob rattled. Once, twice. Then the whisper again, closer now. He forgot to lock the window. I bolted upright. My pulse roared in my ears. Samuel's window. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing the folded rules from the nightstand. The words swam before my eyes, but I found the line. If you hear footsteps upstairs after 10 p.m., check Samuel's room immediately. If he's in bed, do not leave your room until morning. He was in bed. I'd seen him. That meant I couldn't go out there. But what if she was right? I stood frozen for what felt like hours, the whispering fading into silence. The house groaned again. Somewhere outside, the wind howled through the trees. I waited until dawn before I finally dared to move. When I opened my door, everything was still. The hallway, the stairs, the living room, just quiet, empty stillness. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I went upstairs to check on Samuel. His bed was empty. The window was open, and on the sill, pressed into the dust, were the marks of long, thin fingers. The morning light did nothing to chase away the cold that had settled in my bones. The Hartley house looked harmless in daylight, pale blue walls, a tidy porch, frost clinging to the windows. But I knew what I had heard, what I had seen. Samuel's bed was empty. The blanket still held the faint outline of his small body, and the pillow was cold. The window gaped open, the curtain fluttering in the weak morning wind. I stared at the sill for a long time. Those marks weren't from a bird or an animal. They were fingers, long, human-like, pressed deep into the dust as if something had pulled itself inside. I leaned out and looked down. Beneath the window, the frost-covered ground was disturbed. Tracks, small, barefoot prints leading away from the house, vanishing into the tree line. My throat tightened. He couldn't have gone out there alone. I forced myself to move, to think. I grabbed my phone. No signal, not even a flicker of reception. I tried the landline, but the dial tone was dead. The house felt like a tomb, sealed off from the rest of the world. I had to find him. I threw on my coat and boots and followed the tracks through the snow-dusted grass. The trees closed in quickly, their branches creaking under the weight of frost. The deeper I went, the quieter it became, until all I could hear was my own breath and the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. The footprints ended abruptly near an old well. It was half hidden behind a tangle of dead vines, the stone rim cracked with age. The air around it was wrong, colder, stiller, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I called his name. Samuel! No answer. Only the echo of my voice drifting down into the dark mouth of the well. I leaned closer. A smell rose from the depths, damp earth mixed with something metallic. I shivered and stepped back. That's when I heard the faintest whisper, carried by the wind. Help me. It was him, or it sounded like him. Samuel? I called again, my heart pounding. Down here. I moved closer, kneeling at the edge, peering into the darkness. The voice came again, soft but urgent. Please, I can't get out. I couldn't see anything. My phone's flashlight barely reached a few feet down before the light was swallowed whole. But the voice, it was definitely coming from below. I'm going to get a rope, I shouted. Hold on, okay? No reply, just the sound of faint sobbing echoing up the stone shaft. I ran back toward the house. The sky had turned gray, heavy with snow. My boots crunched against the gravel as I rushed up the porch. Inside, the air was still thick with that faint lavender scent. I tore through the closets and found an old coil of rope near the basement door. When I grabbed it, something clattered behind the door. Soft, but deliberate. I froze. Something was moving down there. I remembered the rule. Do not go into the basement. My fingers tightened around the rope. I told myself it didn't matter. Samuel was outside, not down there. I could deal with the basement later. I bolted for the door and sprinted back to the well. But when I got there, the air had changed again. It was silent. Too silent. Samuel? I called, breathless. Nothing. Then a single sound came from behind me. Crunch. Footsteps. I turned, heart hammering. A woman stood among the trees. She was tall and thin, her hair long and wet, clinging to her pale face. She wore a faded white dress that hung in tatters. Her eyes were wrong. Black, wide, glistening like pools of oil. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then she smiled. You shouldn't have opened the window, she said, her voice low and hollow. I stumbled backward, the rope slipping from my hands. Who are you? She tilted her head, still smiling. You heard me last night. You didn't let me in. My stomach dropped. The whisper, the knocking on my door. She took a step closer. Her bare feet didn't leave prints in the snow. Where's the boy? I demanded, my voice shaking. Her smile widened. He's mine now. He called for me. I took another step back, my heel hitting the edge of the well. Stay away from me. She stopped. Her head turned slightly, listening, as if she heard something I couldn't. Then, without warning, she began to move. Fast, too fast. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I tore through the trees. My breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear her, soft footsteps gliding over the snow, always close behind. The house came into view, a pale blur through the woods. I sprinted up the porch steps and slammed the door shut behind me, twisting the lock. The silence that followed was deafening. For a few seconds, I just stood there, gasping for breath, staring at the front door. Then something brushed the window beside it. A pale hand, fingers long and thin, dragged slowly across the glass. I backed away, trembling. The hand lingered for a moment before sliding out of sight. The clock in the hallway began to tick louder, faster, as if matching my heartbeat. I grabbed my phone again, still no signal. My reflection in the hall mirror looked ghostly, my eyes wide with fear. I needed to think. The rules. I pulled the paper from my pocket and read it again. Each line felt heavier now. If the phone rings after midnight, do not answer it. Keep all mirrors covered after 11 p.m. Do not go into the basement. I looked up at my reflection again. The mirror. Maybe I should cover it now, just to be safe. I grabbed a bedsheet from the living room sofa and draped it over the glass. As I turned away, something in the mirror's surface moved. Not me, something behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just the empty hallway. Then the basement door creaked. It opened a few inches, slow and hesitant, as if someone was pushing it from the other side. Cold air drifted out, carrying a faint whisper. Lydia, the same voice. But it wasn't the woman's this time. It was Samuel's, My chest tightened. Samuel, is that you? A pause. Then, help me, please. My rational mind screamed at me not to go near it. The rule was clear, but the sound of his voice, small, trembling, shattered my fear. I stepped closer. Where are you? Down here, he said. I'm cold. I hesitated, hand hovering over the door frame. Every instinct told me this was wrong. The air from the basement was too cold, too still. But what if he really was down there? What if she dragged him inside somehow? I grabbed a flashlight from the counter, pushed the door open, and started down the creaking steps. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing shelves lined with old jars, broken tools, and boxes of yellowed papers. The smell of mildew was suffocating. Samuel? I called again, my voice echoing. Something moved at the far end of the basement, a flicker of motion, too quick to catch. I raised the light. Who's there? No answer. Then I saw it. A small figure standing in the corner, back turned toward me. He was trembling, his hair matted, his pajamas streaked with dirt. Samuel! I rushed forward and dropped to my knees. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? He didn't respond. I reached out to touch his shoulder. The moment my fingers brushed his skin, he turned. His eyes were black, pitch black, and his mouth opened wide, far too wide to whisper. You shouldn't have come down here. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The flashlight flickered, and when the beam steadied, he was gone. The basement was empty. Something behind me exhaled. I turned, and for a brief, terrible second, I saw her, standing halfway down the stairs. Her hands gripped the railing, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her black eyes gleaming in the dim light. I ran. I didn't look back as I scrambled up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and pushed the heavy dining table against it. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. The floor beneath me vibrated with faint, rhythmic knocking. Once, twice, then silence. I collapsed against the wall, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The house was alive. The rules weren't weird. They were warnings. Outside, the snow had started to fall, soft flakes drifting down through the gray light. I thought about running, about bolting into the woods and never looking back. But something told me that wouldn't help. Because whatever she wasn't outside anymore. She was in the house, and night was coming. By the time I'd shoved the table against the basement door, the house had gone completely silent again. No scratching, no whispers, no faint thumping from below, just the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, steady and cold. I sat there on the floor, staring at the locked door, trying to convince myself it was over, that maybe I'd imagined it all. But the truth was, nothing felt real anymore. The house itself seemed to breathe. The air pulsed faintly, like the walls had a heartbeat. When the Hartley's car finally pulled into the driveway that afternoon, I nearly cried with relief. I stumbled to the window just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The sleek black sedan stopped by the porch, and Mr. Clone and Mrs. Hartley stepped out, looking as calm as if nothing had happened. I ran to the door and yanked it open before they even reached the steps. "Where have you been?" I shouted, my voice shaking. "Samuel's gone. There's something in this house. You have to call the police." Mrs. Hartley didn't even flinch. Her pale eyes met mine, cool and unbothered. "You opened the window, didn't you?" she asked softly. I froze. What are you talking about?" "The window in Samuel's room," she said. "It was open when we came home." "I didn't open it," I cried. "It was locked when I left him last night. He's missing. Something took him." Mr. Hartley's jaw tightened. "Then you broke the most important rule." He pushed past me and started up the stairs. I followed, panic rising in my chest. "You don't understand, I didn't." Mrs. Hartley cut me off with a look. "Stay here," she said. "You've already done enough." I stood frozen in the hallway as she followed her husband upstairs. I could hear their muffled voices from above, calm, controlled, like they were discussing dinner plans. Then silence. A few minutes later, they both came back down, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Hartley adjusted his tie. "You'll stay tonight as planned. We'll pay you double for the inconvenience." "What?" I stared at them. "You think I'm staying here after what happened?" Mrs. Hartley's smile was thin and strange. "You agreed to 2 nights, dear. It's already been arranged." "I don't care about the money," I snapped. "That thing, whatever it was, it took your son." Her expression didn't change. "Samuel is where he's meant to be," she said quietly. "The house has chosen. There's no undoing it now." I backed away slowly. "You're insane. Leave before dark if you must, Mr. Hartley said. But if you stay, you'll need to follow the rules very carefully tonight. Every one of them. Then they both turned and walked out of the house again. No argument, no emotion, just gone. The sedan disappeared down the long drive once more, leaving me alone with the echo of their words. The house felt colder now, like something had shifted. I should have left right then, but a part of me couldn't. I didn't know if it was guilt or fear, but I couldn't shake Samuel's face from my mind. The way he looked that first night, small and quiet, drawing strange shadows on his paper. I needed answers. So, instead of packing up and running, I started searching. I went from room to room, opening drawers, checking closets, looking for anything that might explain the Hartleys' behavior, or the creature I'd seen in the woods. Most of the rooms were bare, like no one had lived there for years. The upstairs guest room was filled with dust and cobwebs. The air smelled like mildew and something faintly metallic. In one corner, I found a wooden chest covered in old quilts. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, faded and curled at the edges. Every picture showed the same thing: children, boys and girls, all around Samuel's age. Some smiling, some standing stiffly like they'd been forced to pose. And in each photo, behind them, barely visible in the shadows, was her. That same tall woman in the white dress, her black eyes staring out from the darkness. Sometimes she stood behind a curtain, other times by a window, but always watching. My stomach turned. The last photo in the pile stopped me cold. It was Samuel. He stood in front of the house, his hand clasped in Mrs. Hartley's, and just behind them, faint but unmistakable, was the pale figure again, closer than ever, one bony hand resting on the boy's shoulder. The date scrawled on the back was from 3 years ago. That didn't make sense. Samuel looked the same age now as he did then. I dropped the photo and stumbled back, the air suddenly thick in my lungs. That's when the clock downstairs chimed 7. The sound rolled through the house like thunder. Dusk was settling, and I realized I was running out of time. I went back to the living room, unfolded the paper of rules, and stared at it again. I'd broken one of them already, maybe more, but there had to be a reason behind each one. Maybe if I followed them exactly this time, I could survive the night. I covered every mirror with bed sheets. I double-checked every lock, every window. I even pushed the table back against the basement door. By the time the clock struck 8:30, my nerves were raw. That's when I heard the floorboards creak overhead. It sounded like small footsteps, light, careful, almost like a child's. My heart dropped. Samuel? No answer. The steps moved across the ceiling, pausing above the living room, then the kitchen. Then silence again. Rule number 6 echoed in my head. If you hear footsteps upstairs after 10 p.m., check Samuel's room immediately. If he's in bed, do not leave your room until morning. But it wasn't 10 yet, and I needed to see. I grabbed the flashlight and crept up the stairs, one careful step at a time. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and quiet. Samuel's door was closed. I reached for the knob and hesitated. The air around it felt colder, like something was waiting on the other side. I turned it slowly. The door creaked open. The room was dark except for the weak light from the window. The curtains fluttered, though the glass was still locked. The bed was empty again. The blanket was rumpled, but no one was there. Then I noticed something new. Carved into the wall above the headboard were words, uneven, scratched in deep with something sharp. She watches through the glass. A chill crawled up my spine. I turned to the window and froze. There was a reflection in the glass, not mine. Behind me, in the corner of the room, stood the woman in white. Her eyes gleamed black. Her lips curled into that same impossible smile. And when I turned around, she was gone. The air rippled as if the house itself had inhaled. Then, somewhere downstairs, the phone started ringing. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. My stomach twisted. The rule: if the phone rings after midnight, do not answer it. The ringing grew louder. It echoed through every wall, every corner, like it was inside my head. I clamped my hands over my ears. Stop, I whispered. Please stop. It didn't. The sound shifted, warped until it wasn't ringing anymore. It was a voice. Faint, crackling through invisible wires. Lydia? My knees went weak. It was Samuel again. His voice was shaking. She's here. She's angry. Don't look in the mirrors. I stumbled backward, heart slamming in my chest. The phone wasn't ringing anymore, but the words kept echoing through the air, whispering from everywhere at once. Don't look. And then, one by one, the bed sheets covering the mirrors began to slide off. Not fall, slide, as if invisible hands were pulling them away. The sheet over the hall mirror dropped to the floor. I couldn't help it. I looked, and there she was, standing behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. The hallway was empty, but in the reflection, she hadn't moved. She stood perfectly still, her black eyes fixed on mine. Then slowly her head began to tilt, first one way, then the other. And when her mouth opened, her reflection whispered, "You broke the rules." The lights flickered. Every window rattled at once. The mirror cracked from corner to corner, splintering her face into 1,000 twisted pieces. I ran. Down the stairs, through the hallway, past the ticking clock. I didn't stop until I was outside, gulping the freezing night air. The woods loomed dark and endless ahead. Somewhere behind me, the house groaned, the walls shifting as if it were alive. And then, softly, faintly, I heard a child's laugh from the upstairs window. Samuel. But his voice wasn't right anymore. It was layered, echoing, like more than one child was laughing inside him. The window slowly closed on its own, and the house went still again. I stood there in the snow, trembling, realizing the truth. The house didn't just take him, it kept him. The night after the power went out, I barely slept. Every creak, every rustle of wind outside made me flinch. The image of that shadowy hand smearing across the fogged mirror replayed in my head again and again. By morning, I was pale, exhausted, and desperately trying to convince myself that I'd only imagined it. When the Harpers came back from their weekend trip, they seemed unusually quiet. Mr. Rod Harper thanked me and handed me an envelope with my pay, but Mrs. Harper looked at me strangely, like she was studying my face for signs of something. I smiled weakly, but inside my stomach twisted. That night, I decided I wouldn't return. But before I could even text them, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Harper. "Leah, we need you tonight. Emergency. Triple pay. Triple pay." I hesitated. The last few days had been strange, but I couldn't ignore that kind of offer. Against my better judgment, I agreed. By 7 p.m., I was standing once again at the Harper's door. This time, Mrs. Harper looked even more nervous than before. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed me the key. "The kids are sleeping," she said. "Same rules as always, but—" She stopped herself, glancing toward the hallway mirror. "Don't let them look into any mirrors after 9 p.m., and whatever happens, do not touch them if they start sleepwalking." Sleepwalking? That was new. I nodded slowly, confused but too afraid to ask questions. They left quickly, their car taillights vanishing down the lonely, snow-covered road. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. The wind moaned through the old vents, making the walls groan. I double-checked the locks, closed the curtains, and settled in the living room with my phone and a blanket. At 9 p.m. sharp, I caught something moving in the corner of my eye. It was the mirror at the end of the hallway, the same one I'd seen that strange reflection in before. The light flickered above, and for a split second, I thought I saw movement inside the glass. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just the light. Maybe I was paranoid. But then I heard small footsteps. "Olivia?" I whispered. No answer. The footsteps grew louder, soft and dragging, coming from upstairs. I slowly climbed the staircase, my heart pounding. The air felt heavier with each step. When I reached the top, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tommy, the little boy, was standing at the end of the hallway, facing the mirror. His eyes were open, but glassy. His lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. "Tommy?" I said softly, taking a cautious step forward. He didn't respond. I remembered the rule. Don't touch them if they start sleepwalking. Then I realized what he was whispering. "She's behind you." My breath hitched. I froze, not daring to move. Slowly, I turned my head toward the mirror. For a moment, I saw only my reflection, pale, wide-eyed, terrified. But then, behind me, something dark began to take shape. A tall figure, black as ink, its arms impossibly long, its face just a blur of shifting shadows. The lights flickered violently. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the rug, but the figure didn't move. It only raised one finger to its lips, and the room went silent. Tommy suddenly collapsed to the floor. I rushed to him, forgetting the rule, and shook his shoulders. His eyes fluttered open, but when he looked at me, they weren't the same. They were completely black. He smiled, not like a child, like something else wearing a child's face. "You shouldn't have come back," he said in a voice that wasn't his. I screamed, grabbing him by the arm and dragging him toward his room. He resisted, laughing in a low guttural tone that didn't belong in any human throat. I finally pushed him into bed, pulled the blanket over him, and backed away, shaking. When I turned to leave, I saw Olivia standing in the doorway. She wasn't asleep, but her face was blank, emotionless. She lifted her hand and pointed to the mirror behind me. She wants to come out now, she whispered. Before I could react, the mirror cracked. A long fissure split through the glass from top to bottom, and something black oozed out like ink bleeding through water. The lights flickered again, and the sound, a deep, guttural groan, filled the hallway. I grabbed both kids and ran downstairs, heart hammering so hard I thought I'd faint. The front door wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. I tried every window, sealed tight. Behind me, the TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. Between the flickers, I saw flashes of faces, pale, screaming, mouths stretched wide. Then, through the static, I heard a voice, faint but clear. Don't break the rules, Leah. You've already let her see you. The power cut out completely. I was left in darkness, the sound of my own breathing the only thing I could hear. Then came a whisper from the shadows. Now she knows your name. Something cold brushed the back of my neck, and the mirror in the hallway began to hum, softly at first, then louder, vibrating with a strange, rhythmic pulse. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my reflection, standing perfectly still in the mirror, smiling when I wasn't. When I woke up, the house was dead silent. The air felt heavy, and every breath I took came out in a trembling fog. My phone's flashlight was still on, lying beside me, but the battery had almost drained. The last thing I remembered was that reflection, smiling at me. I sat up slowly. I was lying on the floor near the living room couch. The kids were nowhere to be seen. My first instinct was to run, to get out of that cursed house, but when I looked toward the front door, it was wide open. Snow blew in from outside, leaving a thin white layer on the floorboards. I called out shakily, "Tommy, Olivia?" No answer. I followed the faint trail of small footprints through the snow-dusted hallway. They led to the mirror, the cracked one. But the mirror, it wasn't cracked anymore. It looked new, whole again, worse. There were 3 reflections now. Me, Tommy, and something tall and twisted standing behind us. I turned around. Nothing was there, but the reflections didn't move. They stayed frozen, smiling faintly as if waiting for me to do something. My knees felt weak. I backed away slowly, whispering to myself that this wasn't real. None of it was real. But then, from the upstairs hallway, I heard laughter, high-pitched, echoing, and wrong. I ran up the stairs, nearly slipping on the polished wood. Olivia's room door was open. Inside, the little girl was sitting cross-legged on her bed, staring at her wall. She had drawn something on it. Dozens of black stick figures holding hands in a circle, and in the center, a large, empty oval where a face should have been. "Olivia," I said carefully. "Sweetheart, where's your brother?" She didn't answer. Her lips were moving, whispering words too soft to understand. When I stepped closer, I finally heard them. "She's in the mirror. She's in the mirror. She's in the mirror." I grabbed her shoulders gently, trying to shake her out of it. But when she looked at me, I froze. Her eyes were completely white, no pupils, no color, just pale glowing white. "She's watching you now?" she whispered. I stumbled back, tripping over a pile of dolls. The dolls' heads all faced the same direction, toward the mirror on her dresser. The surface rippled, not like a reflection, like water. Something was pressing from the other side. A shape, a hand. I screamed, pulling Olivia into my arms. But before I could move, a dark, dripping hand burst through the glass, followed by a second. The fingers were long and jointless, like wet branches. They clawed at the frame, pulling the rest of the figure through. A tall, faceless woman made entirely of black liquid. Her head tilted unnaturally, bones cracking as she looked at us. A faint smile curved where her mouth should have been. I dragged Olivia out of the room and down the stairs, yelling for Tommy. We found him standing by the back door, his small hand pressed against the window pane. His reflection on the glass wasn't his, it was hers. "Tommy!" I shouted. He turned slowly. "She said you shouldn't have touched me," he said in that same broken voice. "Now she wants you instead." Every instinct in me screamed to run, but the floor beneath my feet began to shift. The wooden planks turned dark, wet as if soaked in ink. Faces began to form beneath the surface, pressing upward like they were trapped just under a thin sheet of water. Whispers filled the air, dozens of them overlapping. She's seen her. She knows her name. She can't leave now. I grabbed the kids and bolted for the front door. Outside, the storm had gotten worse. The trees bent under the wind, and the snow was thick, suffocating. The house loomed behind us, its windows glowing faintly, not from light, but from the reflection of her watching from every pane. We stumbled through the snow, my lungs burning, my mind spinning with fear. I didn't even know where I was going, just away. But then Tommy started screaming. My reflection! She's following me! I looked back. In the windows of every passing house, every car mirror, every icy puddle, her shape flickered. The faceless woman, always just behind us, always closer. We finally reached the main road, and by some miracle, a police car appeared in the distance. I waved frantically until it stopped. The officer stepped out, shining his flashlight on us. Ma'am, are you all right? He asked, his breath misting in the cold. Before I could answer, Olivia pointed toward his car window. Her. The faceless figure was there, reflected in the glass, standing right behind the officer. I screamed, Don't turn around! But he did. And the moment he looked, his body went stiff. His flashlight clattered to the ground. He turned back toward us, and his face was gone. Just smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. I grabbed the kids and ran again, my legs slipping through snow as the faceless shadow followed. Not walking, not gliding, just appearing, closer each time I blinked. By the time I reached the old wooden bridge near the woods, I couldn't see her anymore, only our reflections in the frozen stream below. I held the kids tight, sobbing, whispering that it was over, that we were safe. But then, in the reflection, my own face began to smile, and I wasn't. The reflection smiled wider, stretching unnaturally until the corners of its mouth reached almost to its ears. I stumbled back, dragging the kids with me. My breath came out in harsh white clouds. The air felt electric, like a storm waiting to break. Then, from the frozen water beneath the bridge came a sound I'll never forget, the sharp, splintering crack of ice breaking. The reflection wavered, distorted, and from beneath the surface something began to rise. A shape, a figure, her. I turned and ran, my boots slipping on the icy ground, my lungs burning with every desperate breath. Behind me, I heard the wet, dragging sound of her limbs pulling free from the mirror-like ice. The sound of something that didn't belong in this world. Don't look back, I screamed at the children. We tore through the woods, branches whipping our faces, snow blinding our path. The trees seemed to twist around us, shifting, trapping us in an endless maze. My mind was spinning, the darkness swallowing everything, and then I saw it. The Harper's house. But it couldn't be. We'd run for nearly half a mile in the opposite direction, yet there it was, glowing faintly through the storm, its windows warm and golden. Olivia started to cry. I want to go home. I wanted to tell her we couldn't, that whatever stood there wasn't a home anymore. But the alternative was the thing behind us, and I could feel her getting closer. Every reflection on every shard of ice flickered with her shape. So I took the kids' hands and ran toward the house. When we reached the porch, the door was already open. The lights inside flickered as if the power couldn't decide whether to stay or die. I pushed the children inside and slammed the door shut behind us. The house was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no ticking clock, just the faint hum of something alive in the walls. I turned to Tommy. Go upstairs, I whispered. Get in your room. Don't look in the mirrors. He shook his head. She's already in them. My heart dropped. And then every mirror in the house, every one I'd covered, ignored, avoided, began to shimmer. Slowly, the blankets and sheets I draped over them started to move, as if being pulled from the inside. One by one, they slid to the floor. Reflections lit up all around me, but in none of them was I standing where I should have been. In one, I was behind the couch. In another, standing in the kitchen doorway. In another, I wasn't there at all. Just the woman, the faceless figure. Closer, clearer, as if she'd been waiting for me to look. Then I heard it. Her voice, the first time she'd ever spoken. You broke the rule, Leah. I turned slowly toward the nearest mirror. Her reflection leaned close, pressing its face against the glass. You touched what's mine? Well, now you belong here. The mirror rippled, and her hand reached through again, wrapping around my wrist. It was ice cold and impossibly strong. I screamed, trying to pull free, but her grip only tightened. My reflection stared at me, smiling, calm, while I fought. Tommy and Olivia screamed from the stairs. Run! I shouted at them. Go! Get out! They didn't move. They were frozen, eyes wide, staring at me, or rather at what was behind me. I turned and saw myself standing there. Same clothes, same hair, same face. But her smile was wrong, too wide, too sharp. She tilted her head and said softly, "You should have followed the rules." Before I could react, the reflection in the mirror yanked me forward through the glass. It was like falling through ice. The cold hit me so hard it stole my breath. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the same living room, but everything was reversed. The air shimmered like liquid, the walls pulsing faintly as though alive. From the other side of the mirror, I could see the kids. They were staring at the glass, crying, and standing next to them was me, or rather the thing that had taken my place. She smiled down at them and said gently, "Everything's okay now. Leah's gone." I pounded on the mirror, screaming for them, but no sound came out. The surface rippled beneath my fists like water, mocking me. Then, the faceless woman appeared beside me inside the reflection world. She didn't need to speak. I could feel her voice in my head. "Every babysitter breaks the rules," she whispered. "That's how we grow." And then she was gone, dissolving into the dark. The mirror went still. On the other side, I watched as the children clung to the other me, the perfect copy who smiled, soothed them, tucked them in. She turned toward the mirror once more, met my eyes, and mouthed the words, "Stay." Then the lights went out, and everything faded to black. I don't know how long I've been here. Sometimes I still see the world through the glass. Other babysitters coming and going, always the same house, always the same rules. They never last long. They always break one. And when they do, another one of us takes their place. And if you ever walk past a mirror and think your reflection smiled a second too late, maybe that's me. Still waiting, still watching, still trapped. End of story. Thank you so much for watching this horrifying story till the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories like this one. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Leah's place? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, this was just one of many strange tales. Stay tuned because another chilling story is coming very soon. Until then, keep your lights on and stay safe.